Good afternoon, and welcome to this session of Wilmington City Council's Finance and Economic Development Committee meeting. My name is Bud Friel, and I'll be hosting the meeting this afternoon. Joining me from Council is our President, Anifa Shabazz, and Linda Gray from the 1st Council District. As you know, the Mayor presented his budget last month for fiscal year 2021, Mayor Michael Brzezicki. It becomes Council's responsibility to review that budget. This is a 5th in a series of budget hearings that we have held, and it is Thursday, April 23rd. Today, we will hear from 3 departments. We will hear from our Audit Department, followed by the Human Resource Department and the Law Department. I did want to make just a couple of brief remarks about the budget. The budget itself was prepared and proposed before the COVID-19 pandemic, and in the budget, there are no tax increases or increases in water or sewer. During the budget hearings, you may hear some departments talk about additional cuts that they're going to make in their budget to try to help us get through this crisis situation. We are by code responsible to pass a balanced budget by the end of May, and that will be our goal. It will be a substitute ordinance from the one that was presented some weeks back, and most likely we will revisit the budget again in the fall to make additional amendments as we understand the full impacts of the pandemic on us. And also, I just want to state that you read and hear a lot about federal money being appropriated for a number of issues. The administration and council will aggressively pursue any federal dollars that's coming into the state or Newcastle County to help us cover some of the additional expenses and the shortfalls that we might see over the next several months. We're going to follow the same format that we followed for the other hearings. We're going to have a brief presentation from OMB. Then I will turn it over to the Director of the Audit Department, Mr. Terrence Williams, for any opening remarks and introductions. And then we will jump into a series of question and answers. Audit is a small department, so our time limit is 45 minutes for this budget hearing. I've asked council members to keep all their questions to budgetary matters. Any programmatic or constituent issues they should take up different forums. We will have a period at the end for constituents to make public comment. You will need to raise your hand at some point during the hearing, and at the end we will recognize you for 3 minutes public comment. We do ask that you keep your comments to the budget that we're reviewing at this time. So I just want to mention we've also been joined by Councilmember Chris Johnson from the 7th District. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the Office of Management and Budget for their brief overview.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Friel, Madam President, and all other honorable members of City Council. Thank you for inviting me to present the Audit Department's fiscal year 2021 proposed budget request on behalf of the Office of Management and Budget. First, let me remind you that further details on the Audit Department budget can be found in the budget packet, as well as in your budget book, beginning on page 87. Additionally, I will reiterate what Mr. Chairman said, that the budget details I am presenting here are based on the original proposed budget, which was developed prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. The city auditor will be discussing further revisions to some of his budget items during his aspect of the presentation. Funding for the Audit Department is derived both from the general fund as well as the water sewer fund. The general fund request is $884,000 and represents a $69,000 or an 8.5% increase over FY 2020. The water sewer fund request, which only consists of accounting and indirect costs, is budgeted at $97,000, a 12% or a 9% increase over fiscal year 2020. All personal services are budgeted in the general fund, and the total personal service budget increased $42,000 or 7%. Regular salaries increased nearly $6,000 or 1.5%. Though a 2% cost of living adjustment or COLA was budgeted for all eligible city employees, this total increase was less than 2% due to an FY 2020 vacancy that was filled at a lower step than budgeted. Regarding benefits, pension contribution increased $19,000, while hospitalization increased nearly $21,000. However, these increases were somewhat offset by a $5,000 decrease in the state pension plan account line. Total MS&E is budgeted at $237,000 in the general fund, a $26,000 or 12.5% increase. This increase is almost solely due to an increase in accounting costs, which are budgeted at $178,000, a $25,000 increase over fiscal year 2020. These additional funds are to be used for additional services to assist the City Finance Department with adjusting journal entries needed to close out the fiscal year, assistance with the CAFR building software, and services to help expedite the completion or review of the statements and notes in the CAFR at the end of the year. A subsequent increase was also prorated to the accounting costs in the water sewer fund as well, totaling $12,000. This increase was the entirety of the increase in the water sewer fund, which is now budgeted at $97,000. This concludes my part of the presentation of the proposed budget request for Audit Department. I can answer any questions you have at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. I also want to mention we've been joined by Councilmember Santi Oliver from the 3rd District. Okay, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Terrence Williams for any introductory remarks, introductions, and then we'll jump into the question and answers. Mr. Williams, are you with us?
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Friel. And I'd like to say thank you for having me here. Good afternoon, Madam President, and honorable members of City Council who are present as well. I also have Tamara Thompson, Audit Manager, here with me.
Hello, everyone.
As far as the vision for the Audit Department, we would like to be able to maintain an efficient approach to the overall audit process. And one of the things we'd like to do going forward is increase the amount of training we offer for automation so that we can have a holistic view of the populations that we're auditing going forward versus using statistical sampling and just testing a small portion of the population or target testing the population. We also would like to provide an independent and objective perspective to an accountable government. I know that's something that's hard to do sometimes, but that's something that we are responsible for doing as far as government, generally accepted government law standards are concerned. Each one of our engagements, we want to make sure that we maintain our objectivity. And in instances where we cannot, we tend to bring in external consultant to help out in those instances where we think it's necessary. We also like to provide an efficient and effective audit and look for ways to help improve controls and processes at the city level. Next page, please. Our top 3 priorities are to conduct quality audits, provide timely and consistent audit follow-ups with management. We do that on a quarterly basis when we meet with the audit review committee. We have management attend those meetings that they can discuss about the progress or the lack of progress that has been made since the last audit actually had completed. We also like to promote awareness of the fraud hotline. It's something we do throughout the year as well. Next slide, please. The top 3 performance measures for the auditing department. Number 1 are looking at completed audits that are finished on the fiscal year. Reporting the status of management action plans to the audit review committee. We like to focus on whether something has been implemented as far as action plans, whether they're open, whether the action plans are past due with action taken or past due with no action taken. And we also have fraud calls investigated on an as-needed basis throughout the year as well.
Okay, before we jump into the question and answers, I was remiss in not introducing the Chief of Staff for the Mayor's Office, Danny Washington, and the Chief of Staff for City Council, Marshall Bastine. They obviously are also with us. Okay, could you discuss the number of plan audits proposed for fiscal year 21 and the number of plan audits versus completed audits for fiscal year 19 and 20? And then there's a couple of sub questions there.
Chairman Friel, I
Yes,
definitely can talk about that, but we had missed a slide where it showed a reduction
okay.
for this year's fiscal budget. We're reducing the budget by $10,000 for travel and subsistence. I don't really foresee us being able to travel with the current COVID-19 pandemic, and so that was something that we definitely felt could be reduced. But as you know, our budget is very tight, but we figured that's something we definitely could reduce in our budget.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
The next slide, please. Regarding our FY21 audit universe, we currently do not have that information available because we have not sent out our annual risk assessment, which is used to help us develop what that audit universe will be. Hopefully next week we will be able to send out the annual risk assessment so that we can start circulating, getting interviews, and getting feedback as far as what the city managers, as well as we send out to city council as well, to get feedback as far as what are the things that you all feel are the highest risk confronting the city. So that will be able to help us develop our audit universe for FY21 once that is complete. As far as the specific number of audits that will be carried over for FY21, we also do not have that, but as of today, we've completed 2 audits in FY20 from the FY20 audit plan, and we had 14 total, and 1 audit was put on hold due to an ADP conversion that was stalled. Now, as of today, I mentioned we had 2 FY20 audits that are completed, and we had 3 FY19 carryover audits that were completed during this fiscal year. And in addition, we had 6 audits that are work in progress on the FY20 audit plan. We have 6 audits that have not been started. So if I had to say as of today, most likely we will be carrying forward 6 audits to the FY21 audit plan if we are not able to start those audits by the end of this fiscal year. We also had 1 agreed upon procedures review that was completed in FY20. So when you look at the 1 agreed upon procedures plus the other 5 audits I mentioned, you have 6 audits that have been completed in FY20 thus far, 6 more that are work in progress, and 6 that have not been started.
I want to make sure I understand where you stand between 19 and 20. So you're going to carry over 6 audits for fiscal year 20.
Correct.
Is that correct? So does that mean all the other audits in 20 were completed?
We anticipate being able to wrap those up unless there are some unforeseen circumstances that prevent us. Because with the COVID-19, We've encountered some challenges with the workforce now working from home.
Right.
Other the things that audit does, it relies on the cooperation from process owners.
Right.
And, you know, during the past month and a half, information has been slower than usual due to the changes that the current workforce is experiencing. Hopefully things will pick back up and we will be able to proceed forward and continue completing the audits that we had planned on.
I guess I only raise that because if you have 6 that you're going to be carrying over, I would think that would then have some impact on your 21 plan, on how many audits you're actually going to list in your 21 plan. Is that correct?
Correct. We will not add as many audits due to the fact that we're going to be carrying forward 6.
Okay, all right. Councilmember Gray, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Okay, we're talking about audits. So now that you've seen the recent audits for the Wilmington Housing Partnership and the multiple material deficiencies, when will you initiate the forensic audit that City Council had voted for? And if not, why not?
Good afternoon, Councilwoman Gray.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
We came to this meeting prepared to talk about our budget.
Yeah, let me go ahead and interrupt here. We're here to discuss the fiscal year 21 budget, the audit department. I understand that you have concerns about the partnership. You can bring those up with Mr. Williams anytime, any other time except for this budget hearing. You can also request that it be put on the agenda for the Community Development and Urban Planning Committee meeting. I'm not going to start discussing the housing partnership as part of his budget.
Well, I'm not discussing how, I'm discussing an audit that we requested, and I'm asking.
The audits are completed, and you have those audits to review, but they're not part of his budget hearing today.
I don't have any other questions then.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to question number 2. Discuss the planned use of $227,000 budget and accounting fees for the external audit. And there's one sub-question to
that. We currently have $189,000 budgeted to cover the cost of the external audit firm. And we actually just had that selection approved today at our audit review committee meeting. Dolphin, Lyons, and Sherman will be the external auditor for the city for the next 3 years. $38,000 is budgeted to fund additional auditing services provided by consultants as deemed necessary. And we also have $35,000 budgeted for the CAFR assistance to the finance department. That's something that's included in our budget this year. In prior years, it was part of the finance budget. But because we saw where those additional fees were being charged, we both agreed that it made more sense for it to appear in audit's budget unless they have additional services that finance specifically needs for their department, we will be able to cover it.
Okay, can you go over some of your vendors?
Yes. Community Services, they've been one of the vendors that we've used in the past to help out with the Marlboro audit. And we also have Victor Prosperos. He's a consultant who's currently working on the Treasury audit for us. Unfortunately, that audit we have not been able to progress forward because of various delays that have presented themselves, but those are two vendors that we've used in the past.
Okay. Discuss the planned use of $22,000 budget and temporary agency account line.
The $22,000, that's going to be used for the part-time office assistant that we have with us throughout the fiscal year. She's been with our department since I've been with the city prior to me joining the city. Next slide, please.
Okay. discuss how the city and your department is promoting the city's fraud hotline, and there's a couple of sub-questions there.
Our department promotes the fraud hotline via the city's website. We also have signage and pamphlets throughout the city. And on a limited basis, we perform advertising. In the past, during like Fraud Awareness Week, we've done that, and I can see us continuing to do that going forward. And as far as
you take advantage of WITN at all?
we have taken advantage of WITN in the past as well as part of the advertising that we utilize. And because of our budget is so limited, we really have to monitor when we actually do things of that nature. And typically, it's been during Fraud Awareness Week when we've incorporated utilizing WITN.
Can you specify if there have been any fraud cases as a result of any calls to the hotline?
We've had calls to the hotline throughout the year and throughout the last 3 fiscal years. In FY18, we had 4. In FY19, we had 15. And in this fiscal year, we've had 4. Now, sometimes we receive calls and they're pretty much routed to the appropriate parties if they are not things that we feel really should be investigated by our department.
Can you discuss any outcomes from the most recent audit peer review?
Our department successfully passed the last peer review, and there were 3 observations and suggestions noted by the peer review team that have been addressed.
When was that? When did that actually take place?
You know the actual September of last year.
September of 2019?
Yes, and we have the actual report on our website. If anyone would like to see the report. We updated our policies and procedures to reflect the 2018 Yellow Book revision and electronic checklist, including references to all key requirements of GAS for planning, evidence, and reporting. We have changed the form. We have changed from reporting our CPs on the fiscal year reporting to a calendar year basis. This will be consistent with the Institute of Internal Auditors requirements for reporting hours annually.
CPEs are?
Certified, continuing professional education. That's the training that we have to do each year. And biannually, we have to have 80 hours of CPE credits completed. We have also updated our electronic checklist to document evaluation of computer processed information.
Will the current situation impact your folks getting their CPEs?
I don't foresee it impacting the team being able to fulfill that requirement, because my team, they're currently working from home and we have access to the VPN. And I know for a fact during our checkups, people are taking CPE credits while they're home.
You have credits you have to maintain every 2 years?
Yes, we have to maintain 80 credit hours every 2 years. We typically pick up 40 hours each year.
Right. All right, the last item, as with the other departments, is the organizational chart, which again is a small one on 1 page. And then also there's a list in the packet that lists each employee and their job description. All right. Any other questions from council members? All right. Is there any questions from public that would like to make any comments on the audit department's budget? And I'm not seeing any. And I'm not seeing any other questions. Councilmember, Mr. Williams, thank you, and Ms. Thomas, for coming in and answering our questions. I'm assuming you'll come back to us as soon as you have your fiscal year 21 audit plan in place, so we can discuss and review.
Yes, we definitely will have that at the annual, or our next audit review committee meeting, and we'll be able to share that and publish that on our website so that anyone that would like to see it will have access to it.
All right, thank you. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back at 4:45 and review the budget for the Human Resource Department. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and welcome back to this session of Wilmington City Council's Finance and Economic Development Committee. It is Thursday, April 23rd. This is the fifth in a series of reviews of Mayor Michael Brzezicki's fiscal year 2021 budget. We just heard from the Audit Department, and now we're going to hear from the Human Resource Department. I want to go ahead and introduce council members that are joining us. President of City Council, Hanifa Shabazz. First District Council Member, Linda Gray. Third District Council Member, Cynthia Oliver. Fourth District Council Member, Michelle Harley. Seventh District Council Member, Chris Johnson. And Council Member at Large, Sam Guy. As I've said at the beginning of each budget hearing, this budget was proposed prior to the COVID-19 crisis. The budget itself has no tax increases or increases in water sewer fees. However, you will hear the directors talk about additional cuts that they are looking to make in their budget. Once again, those will be proposed cuts. Council is responsible to pass a balanced budget by the end of May, which we will do. We will have a Finance Committee meeting in the middle of May, which we will probably consider a substitute ordinance. And most likely, we will revisit this budget in the fall when we understand the full impacts of the COVID-19 crisis on our budget. As I stated earlier, the administration and council will aggressively pursue any federal dollars that is coming into the state or Newcastle County to help us fund the additional expenses and make up any shortfalls in our revenues. As far as this hearing goes, we're going to follow the same format. We'll have a presentation from the Office of Management and Budget. Then we'll have a brief presentation from the Director of Human Resources, Ms. Charlotte Barnes, and then we'll get into question and answers. There's been a 90-minute time limit set for this hearing. I'm going to ask council members to keep all questions to budgetary matters, and any programmatic or constituent issues should be addressed in other forums. There will be time at the end of the hearing for public comment. Anyone that wants to make comment, you can raise your hand at any time, and we will acknowledge you at the end for 3 minutes. And your comments should relate to the budget hearing that we are reviewing now. I did want to also acknowledge that we are being joined by the Chief of Staff of the Mayor's Office, Danny Washington, and the Chief of Staff of City Council, Marshall Bassnight. So at this time, I'm going to turn this over to the Office of Management and Budget.
Hello, and thank you, and good afternoon, Chairman Friel, Madam President, and honorable members of City Council. Funding for the Human Resources Department is derived from the general fund and 3 self-insurance funds: risk management, workers' compensation, and health and welfare. The Department of Human Resources is requesting a total budget of $34.9 million. $3 million is allocated towards personal services, $5.8 million is allocated towards MS&E, and $26 million is allocated towards the 3 self-insurance groups, which includes the city's medical costs. Overall, the Human Resources General Fund request is $2.4 million. This request is nearly identical to the fiscal year 2020 budget. Personal services increased nearly $16,000, largely driven by a 2% COLA budgeted for all city employees. Regular salaries increased $29,000. MS&E costs in the general fund are budgeted at $465,000 and are nearly identical to the fiscal year 2020 total, decreasing only $31. Increases in travel and subsistence, food, and workshops, seminars, and training are offset by a decrease in miscellaneous charges that are not otherwise classified. Moving on to the self-insurance funds. The three self-insurance funds make up much of the total budget request, totaling over $32.5 million, an increase of $700,000 or 2.2%. The risk management fund request totals $4.25 million. This is an increase of roughly $134,000. Personal services in the fund increased only $1,900. MS&E costs increased nearly $132,000. Increases in liability, insurance claims for the motor vehicle fund, and consultants, which total $150,000, were partially offset by an $85,000 decrease in legal defense for insurance claims. Moving on to the Workers' Compensation Fund. The Workers' Compensation Fund request is $5 million. This is an increase of nearly $243,000 or 5.1%. Personal services increased $29,000. MS&E costs decreased almost $176,000. This decrease was largely driven by a decrease in insurance claims for legal defense, which decreased by $165,000. The workers' compensation self-insurance account lines collectively increased $389,000, driven primarily by increases in medical costs, as well as worker compensation other costs, which collectively increased over $400,000. Finally, moving on to the Health and Welfare Fund. The Health and Welfare Fund request is $23.3 million, a 1.4% increase. Personal services decreased 5.3% in the fund, while MS&E costs increased 7.9%. The fund's self-insurance account lines are responsible for paying the city's medical and prescription costs. These account lines collectively increased $326,000 or 1.5%. Based on estimates provided by USI, the city's insurance broker, medical costs are budgeted at $14 million, while prescription costs are budgeted at $4.2 million. The city is now also providing a vision benefit to its employees, and this benefit is budgeted at $112,000 in fiscal year 2021. This concludes my presentation for the proposed budget request for the HR department. I can answer any questions you have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Charlotte Barnes, the Director of Human Resources, to go over her mission, priorities, and then we will jump into the question and answer. Ms. Barnes, are you with us? Yes, you are.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I have a few comments to make before diving into the questions.
Okay.
Good afternoon, President Hanifa Shabazz, Councilman Friel, all honorable members of council and council staff. Thank you for the opportunity to present the fiscal 21 proposed budget for the Department of Human Resources for your consideration. It is indeed my privilege and honor to serve the city as the Director of Human Resources. And yes, I am still excited to lead the department during these very unprecedented times. The global pandemic of COVID-19 has had a tremendous impact on the entire operations of the department, as HR is on the front lines assisting with and executing the city's response to the coronavirus. As you might imagine, from the medical dispensary, who was responsible for identifying and tracking those employees who've been exposed to, tested positive for, or instructed to self-isolate or self-quarantine as a result of the coronavirus, to the compliance division, primarily the deputy director and HR leave administrator, who's responsible for managing and tracking those on COVID-related leave, to our class and comp division, responsible for payroll processing and assisting with tracking overtime and other compensation related to COVID-19 costs, and then our benefits division, working to assist employees with the increased use of telemedicine, as well as negotiating with our benefit provider that no employee should incur any costs associated with COVID-19 testing and treatment. The entire department has been focused on responding to and supporting the needs of our employees. Last year, when I came before you, I advised that we were diligently working to make the forward progress necessary to become a 21st century HR department. I indicated that the world of HR was rapidly changing and that the department had to be prepared and equipped to meet the city's needs to attract and retain a high quality workforce to meet the needs of the citizens we serve, as well as ensure a productive work environment for city employees. The world of HR indeed continues to change, particularly in response to coronavirus. In fact, a recent news report indicated that the role of HR professionals is one of the essential services most often forgotten or overlooked during the crisis. In fact, during this time of major upheaval and uncertainty, human resources has been busy helping executive leadership oversee the remote workforces and navigate a situation that no one possibly could have fathomed, establishing and implementing policies to address teleworking, identifying virtual talent acquisition methods that are in alignment with social distancing requirements, and managing compliance with the recently enacted Families First Coronavirus Relief Act. I would dare say that busy is an understatement. Last spring, the administration implemented CityStat, where focused attention is given to various metrics and critical indicators. As such, the department will be busy in fiscal 21 with the top 3 priorities associated with CityStat that are listed in this presentation. However, we will remain nimble and responsive to changes in the environment while also working to continue the forward progress we have made in the areas of compliance, training, risk control, and healthcare. Limited resources as a result of the financial impact of COVID-19 will hinder but will not deter our efforts. Before delving into the presentation and questions, I would like to take this opportunity to recognize the Human Resource Department's management team. They are Tara DeRocco-O'Brien, Esquire, Deputy Director, Wendy Stanford, Director of Employment Services, Bruno Battaglia, Occupational Health and Safety Program Manager, James Robb, Risk Manager, and Donnie Bougely Smith, Employee Benefits Manager. I owe a debt of gratitude to them, along with the rest of the dedicated employees of the department who work hard every day to meet the needs of the city's workforce. With your permission, I'd like to begin responding to council's written questions.
Okay. Well, the very first question is discuss the budgetary account lines that could potentially be impacted as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, can I go back to the mission and then I'll talk about the priorities and then jump into the questions? I think I got ahead of myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said you were ready for the questions.
I got ahead of myself. I'm sorry.
All right. Yes, you may.
The mission of the department is to provide the necessary human resources to city departments in order to promote the highest quality workforce and productive work environment, maintain the city's operational and fiscal stability through effective risk management. I will turn it over to Tara DeRocco O'Brien, who will take over in handling the priorities and key performance indicators for next year.
The fiscal 21 key priorities, we've listed 3 because that is what we were asked for, although we do have more than just 3 priorities for the department. And as Charlotte Barnes has indicated, these do align with our city stat initiatives that we are being held accountable through the mayor's office. The first priority is to continue developing strategic processes to promote compliance with various state and federal laws, including the EEOC, the ADA, FMLA, and City Code 4054. The second is to enhance the city's performance management efforts with timely, relevant feedback on employee performance, and to enhance the talent acquisition process through employment services to ensure the city's ability to attract and retain a qualified workforce. The key performance indicators, they align with the 3 key priorities. The first goal is to ensure prompt, thorough investigation of all workplace internal complaints and investigations within the 90-day goal that we have established. We also want to ensure performance evaluations are timely completed 90% of the time, and that's across the entire workforce. And also to enhance the talent acquisition process to ensure the city's ability to attract and retain a qualified workforce by extending offers for non-uniformed personnel within 120 days of vacancy 90% of the time.
Okay, can we jump into the questions now?
Absolutely.
All right, as I stated, if you could just talk to us a little bit about some of the budget lines that potentially could be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, so I've attached a chart on the next slide that can walk us through that. So, you know, as I approach the budget post-COVID, as you mentioned, this was prepared pre-COVID, but post-COVID, had to take a long look at, you know, what some things are nice to do's and some things are have to do's. And while any HR professional worth their salt places a high priority on continual professional development, how we are professionally developed in this COVID environment is likely to be different. For example, I sit on the National Training Committee for a national organization, and our conference actually was to be held. I would have been flying out on Sunday to attend that conference. Well, obviously in this environment, it was canceled. And one of the things that we'll be doing is all of the presenters will be presenting via Zoom, and we'll roll that out to all of the conference attendees. So realizing that that may be the way of the future, we've taken a look at and was able to scale back on the travel associated with the professional development. Now that said, we will still make sure that we are professionally developed, but how will be the difference. And so we've been able to look at the travel line in each of our various divisions and scale back in that regard. Also food associated with our admin day well, across various divisions, but specifically in the administrative division, we conduct an administrative professionals day for all of the admins across city budget, across the city organization. We will scale back the banquet associated with that, as well as the HR annual team building event that we have. And then with trophies and awards, you know, HR does a lot of the nice feel-good kinds of things for the workforce, and some things in this environment are nice to do, but we may not be able to continue to do. So we're scaling back the trophies and awards associated with Take Our Children to Work, also with Admin Day, and with our team building, our departmental team building. You'll see an employment services division, that's the travel associated with professional development, that's $3,000 there. And then an initiative that we wanted to get off of the ground in this current budget year, but was not unable to, due to having to redirect the staff responsible for that to a different function, was the implementation of City University. And while that is very important to deal with the training needs associated with our city workforce, in this environment, the likelihood with shifting priorities that would get done in the upcoming fiscal year, had to take a real hard look at that in this environment. And that is something that we would defer doing. Again, food associated with our new employee orientation, our Keys to Success banquet that we have to recognize outstanding contributions of our workforce, that we scaled back on that. And then of course the trophies and awards associated with that program as well, Customer Service Week and others. In class and comp, you'll see the reduction in travel for professional development, but also another item that we had wanted to get off of the ground in this budget year, but was unable to do so because we've yet to hire the director of class and comp, was the implementation of a new class and comp system. So we're scaling back on that and deferring that. And then in the compliance division, you'll see travel, we scaled back there. But then external investigations, and there's a question that the deputy director will speak to later on in the presentation, but that's something that you never know how many you're going to get or when you have to do them. But we took a look at some trend and felt that we could probably scale back in that regard about $21,000. So all told in the general fund, it's just shy of $150,000 in reductions to the fiscal 21 proposed budget. And then you'll see through our internal service funds, a similar theme where we're scaling back on the travel associated with professional development. So those are all items, line items that could be impacted in this COVID-19 environment.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide.
Just briefly discuss the union labor contracts and their and the dates of the contracts, expiration dates.
Okay. By way of context, we have 1,100 city employees and 75% of our workforce is unionized and covered by the 6 collective bargaining agreements that are listed here. Of those collective bargaining agreements, we still have 3 unions that are currently under contract. We have 2 unions, the AFSCME Local 1102B, which is our school crossing guards, and our AFSCME Local 320, which are our blue collar union, as I'll call them, or labor trades and craftsmen. Their contract expired in June of 2018. And we are in active contract negotiations with each of those units. I would also note that we have begun successor negotiations with the FOP, both captains, inspectors, and rank and file recently. And then Local 1590 is our fire union, and the contract did expire, and we are awaiting a decision from PERB from binding interest arbitration, and we anticipate having that decision by May 13th.
Okay. Discuss any current vacant positions, duration of vacancies, time frame for filling the positions.
Okay. So listed on the chart here are the 3 vacant positions that are within the department, currently within the department. And the chief of staff did mention, and as is noted in the media, that there has been a hiring freeze as it relates to the city of Wilmington, with the exception of essential positions. So the HRIS administrator, which supports the payroll function, we do intend to move forward with that essential position, and we anticipate having filled that position hopefully by June of 2020. The labor relations specialist is still vacant, and the director of class and comp are vacant, and those are pending at this time in terms of a timeline to fill.
Okay. Discuss any proposed changes to positions, any new, deleted, upgrades.
So we have no net adds in positions within the department this year. And taking a look at the department, we, I would dare say misjudged the support that would be needed in terms of the payroll supporting the payroll function when we talked about migrating to an external vendor. And we had said 2 positions, and now in assessing it, we really need a third, more junior position. So we've opted to delete the employee engagement administrator that we created but had not filled. Employee engagement is a very important function. We're doing that in other ways within the department, not to the degree that we'd like to, but we are doing employee engagement in other ways, and just felt that knowing that I could not add a position this year, I sacrificed the employee engagement administrator for the HRIS coordinator.
Okay. Discuss the planned use of $158,000 budget in miscellaneous services, considering you've only spent about $12,000 to date this year.
So there are budget items that tend to be cyclical in nature and also unpredictable. And external investigations, you know, are one of those items that you kind of never know if you're going to get them. You can't plan for them, but you need to have the resources to pay for them should they arise. And we had an uptick in a prior year for external investigations, and felt that we needed to make sure that we had planned for them. And going forward this year, you'll see that that's one of the areas that I talked about scaling back and having the ability to cut. And then also the payroll vendor, we anticipate expending those resources before fiscal year end.
Can you talk a little bit about deficiencies for using the new payroll service?
Well, the using the payroll service was always more of an operational issue, to have more efficiencies in terms of how we are able to produce data, how we are able to self-serve, and how we're able to be in compliance. So that was always the operational efficiency, but there is also an estimated cost savings of about $135,000 associated with that.
Okay. You already mentioned the reduction in external investigations. Can you just give us the numbers of investigations that you had in 19 compared to 20?
Yes, and I'll have the Tara DeRocco speak to that.
Yeah, so for fiscal year 19, there were 5 investigations that were completed externally. And what that means is they were completed by either an HR consulting firm or an outside attorney. Fiscal year 20 to date, there's 1 investigation that has been outsourced, and that is still pending.
Okay. Discuss the planned use of $120,000 budget in professional fees. Once again, considering you've only spent $31,000 this year to date.
Okay, so while this was a pre-COVID budget, we were expecting to expend the $120,000, but with the cuts, what remains in that line is about $20,000. And that $20,000, the lion's share of it has to do with arbitration fees associated with grievances that move on to arbitration. And then the remaining portion is for any residency investigations that we need to conduct. And then also for temporary agency, should we have to use an external agency for departmental absences.
Okay. Justify the $156,000 budget across the following account lines. And once again, we've covered some of this, but I'll let you go through it quickly again. Things like memberships, food, trophies, travels.
So with your permission, I'll focus on the areas that we left in the budget, because as you mentioned, we did make some cuts. What we did leave in the budget, that $53,000 line in the employment services, there is budgeted $50,000 for citywide training for the entire city. So that's not training associated with only within the HR department, but that's training that we would provide to the workforce, soft skills as well as technical skills, supervisory and management training as well. That is still within the budget. The other thing that is still in the budget in the administrative division under that $14,000 is the tuition reimbursement program. There's $10,000 budgeted for tuition reimbursement, and we have seen pretty good usage over the past several years where we have expended or nearly expended the entire amount. So we did leave that within the budget. The food trophies and awards in the admin division has to do with the, we did cut that. We scaled back on some of the ways that we would recognize employees. And then in the employment services division, we kept the no employee orientation, and we kept keys to success, and we kept years of services awards. So we were able to cut the food associated with that because it's not likely that we'll be sitting down having a significant banquet, but there are ways that we have recognized with monetary gifts people's employees' years of service. In the compliance division, that $18,000, we kept a good bit of that for state mandated training. As you are aware, the state mandates training for sexual harassment. That includes new hires. That includes newly promoted people into supervisory positions. And that includes the entire workforce every 2 years. So we did need to leave money in the budget for those lines.
Did you say harassment was only for new employees?
No. Well, we're required to conduct sexual harassment training for all newly hired employees and all newly promoted employees into supervisory positions. And that has to be done, I believe it's within 90 to 180 days of them being hired. However, we are also required to do the entire workforce every 2 years.
Okay. Before we move on, I just wanted to mention we've been joined by Councilmember Vash Turner from the 5th District. Okay.
Can I ask a question on that last screen?
Yeah, sure.
Director Barnes, how you doing?
Well, thank you, Councilman Turner.
All right. I was looking at the top line for the professional development and tuition reimbursement program.
Yes.
Do you with that line, with the situation that we're in now, were you thinking about cutting from other lines and maybe adding more to that while some of your employees are home and they have time to do like online training? Have you thought about that?
Well, that is an option that we could pursue. I'm not sure if you had heard that we have been spending the amount budgeted for tuition reimbursement, nearly expending all of it or very near all of it each year. We realize that in this environment, how we educate ourselves could be different now. So there may be more online as opposed to face-to-face classes. And if that results in a reduction in price, that would allow us to meet the needs of more people. But to the extent that we can provide additional resources, that could potentially come from citywide training as well. So the resources that we have to meet the needs of continuing to develop and advance our workforce, I think we can make that work, and I appreciate your suggestion.
So real quick, for year to date, the lines that we have up here to year to date, you said that the reimbursement program, we have almost exhausted that. So out of any of the categories that's up here now, do you know where we're at as far as year to date with any of those?
I could get that information for you. I do know because the Office of Management and Budget sends us a report every Monday. So I absolutely have the information. I just don't have it at my fingertips right now. Can I commit to getting that back to you?
Yes. And let me just give you where I'm going at with this. If it's possible from the year to date, if we could possibly, Mr. Chair, you tell me if I'm right or we going the wrong way, but is it possible that we can take the year-to-date money that's left over from any of these categories and maybe make an amendment to the reimbursement tuition for this year, and then kind of utilize what we have left over now in case you see some tuition or some programs that can be utilized for your staff to while we have this opportunity. Well, I don't want to say opportunity, but
no. So Councilman Turner, great idea and great concept. I will commit to this. One, the tuition reimbursement program is not only for the individuals that within HR, but for citywide. If we expend more than our budget for tuition reimbursement, if there is a request, I have to believe that there's a way that we can meet the needs of that request within our existing budget. And then if there are opportunities and people are looking for ways to continuously be trained, we can work to meet those needs. One of the things that I talked about earlier is that I believe very strongly in professional development. And one of the things that have benefited us during this time is our ability to reach out to the professional organizations that we belong to and hop on webinars or get updates from our network of individuals, particularly, very specifically, as it relates to implementing the Families First Coronavirus Act. That act was passed in late March. We had to implement it within like 5 days. And the deputy director and I was able to jump on some webinars and see how other jurisdictions across the country were implementing this act and then roll out that for us. So there may be ways that other employees can jump on webinars, and to the extent that we can support that, we certainly will.
Have we also thought about trauma that may be caused by some of our employees from this COVID, or being affected by someone that they might have been in the workplace with that had COVID, or someone that they known that either has COVID or passed away from COVID? Have we thought about the trauma part of that for our staff?
We absolutely have, Councilman. And I want to say it was last week, because we've tried to communicate with the workforce at least once a week since COVID has been going on, oftentimes more often than once a week. But I think it was last Monday, we sent out resources for dealing with your children who are at home, dealing with the stresses associated with working from home, if that's not what you desire to do or had planned to do. How do you handle when someone in your family has been diagnosed? And all of those things are provided through our employee assistance program. Health Advocate is our employee assistance provider. And we've sent out videos that they have forwarded to us to share with our workforce on how to handle this situation. It's unprecedented for all of us, and nobody knows what to do, how to do. So we're as often as we get resources, as often as we get information that we believe is valuable to share with the workforce, we certainly have been doing that, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and move forward. Ms. Barnes, discuss the $23 million funds budgeted for city employees' healthcare costs.
So, Councilman Friel, for the balance, a good portion of the balance of the presentation, I am going to turn over to Donnie Bougely-Smith, who is the benefits manager, Bruno Battaglia, who's the occupational health and safety program manager, and Jim Robb, who is the risk manager. I will jump in as need be to make some overarching comments, but the balance of the presentation, a good bit of it will be them. And I'll turn it over to Donnie at this time.
Is she with us?
He is.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Regarding the 23 million in budgeted costs, I have 2 slides here. The second one is really just my talking points that I'll speak to with this chart. Overall, the fund is up $242,000, primarily because of our new vision program and the reallocation of dental. As you can see here, our medical costs are relatively flat, which are a good indication of our city employees better managing their overall health and wellness. Our stop loss insurance is actually down for the upcoming year. That's really reflecting that we have less larger claimants, and they are decreased to our % of total claims. After a 2-year rate hold, we're seeing a slight increase in our medical admin. So costs, so that means just that the fee that we pay per person per month is going up slightly for fiscal 21. And as I mentioned, in our dental cost, we are, every year we reevaluate all of our self-insurance lines, and we realized that our active employees were using a larger percentage of our dental, so we reallocated that back into the fund. And then prescription is really just a reflection of our drug utilization, and the underwriters provide a number that's based on our current illnesses and treatments. And then, as I mentioned, we do have our new vision program, which is preventative, and it's appearing as a $112,000 charge as a new budgeted line item.
Okay, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the recommendations that have been implemented from the task force, the healthcare task force?
Sure, that's on the next slide. So of the the Healthcare Task Force report has really been our beacon in terms of how we think about benefits administration, plan design, and education. It was published in April of 2017, and it included 33 recommendations, 15 of which had $5.9 million worth of anticipated savings. To date, we've been happy and proud to have accomplished 14 of those initiatives. 7 recommendations that we have implemented have an anticipated savings of $3.1 million. The remaining recommendations really are education and engagement based, and I'm going to talk about that and our activities on the next few slides, but they are certainly harder to quantify. And then in terms of the balance of the recommendations, we are evaluating our strategic plan and really looking at 4 years post-publication, which of the remaining recommendations are still actionable for the city.
All right. You want to go right into how you've been promoting and marketing the plans to the city?
Yes. So the next 2 slides just really speak to that. These talking points here are really reflective of the work that we've been doing since the last time we had a hearing. So in January, we launched our diabetes prevention program. We're really excited about this program. It's an evidence-based program helping to address the pre-diabetic population. We had started the program in February before everything happened with COVID. As an example, in terms of that education and engagement piece that I mentioned previously, we started to do the program on site. Our hope was just to have 2 classes of 12 as a starting point. The feedback was so tremendous. We ended up having 3 classes of 20 people each, which was just really phenomenal result for us in terms of employees really being excited and engaged in terms of understanding their pre-diabetic status and wanting to do something about it. Something that was really unique about the program as well is that our Chief of Staff, Tanya Washington, and Director Barnes partnered together to allow us to offer the 1 hour weekly class by donating 30 minutes of work time so that employees had a further incentive to participate. And of course, since COVID, we've taken the class virtual, and it's actually continuing to do really well. We've been able to continue 2 out of the 3 classes. We also realized that there was really a lot of heart health issues at the city. The medical dispensary has developed a great partnership with the CDC. Last fall, we started doing stroke prevention workshops, even as early as 5:30 in the morning, to help ensure that all of our workers, especially some of our essential workers that work shift, could attend. And when you look at those workshops and the attendance, you're looking at 50 to 70 people on average, which is fantastic for us. We've continued our work in expanding physician engagement. So that's now been expanded. So that's that WellWorks program where you receive a 2% discount on your premium. We were able to extend that to more of the workforce due to contract negotiations. We're all familiar, we've talked before about our work with telemedicine. We launched that 2 years ago, so we kind of feel a little bit ahead of the curve since telemedicine is really a go-to option right now. And then we've continued our benefit service days where we're engaging with various portions of the workforce to help educate them and make them aware of some of their benefits and programs. As I mentioned, we carved out for the first time a true vision care benefit. So we were really excited about the 2 plans there. And then for the first time in a long time, we upgraded our dental program. We added a plan 3. We have a very rich dental benefit, but we still found that it wasn't quite meeting the needs of our families. So we were really excited to upgrade and add a plan 3. And then we also worked to add an opioid prevention program through Express Scripts, which is our pharmacy provider. Again, in continuation with the medical dispensary, we executed a mini wellness week. It started with the health fair. Again, that CDC partnership came into play. So we were actually able to offer on-site expanded healthcare screenings. So not just doing blood pressures, but we were actually able to do non-fasting glucose and cholesterol tests on site, and people were able to get their results immediately and be able to speak to a nutritionist or a graduate fellow at the University of Delaware. So that was really phenomenal and well attended. And then 2 days later, we had our second annual Fall Fest, which is really a celebration of the city's wellness, giving people an opportunity to think about stress management, exercise, and healthy options, but also as a bit of an appreciation for all the work that everybody's doing and the time and attention that they're paying to their overall health. So that ended with our second annual Fall Fest as well. And then lastly, we launched our branded Wellness in Wilmington program. I like to affectionately call that program, Coupon for Government. It's really our healthy living program that it's connecting you to discounts and incentives throughout the city. So here we were able to announce specific discounts at venues like the YMCA, Planet Fitness, New Balance, and certainly a number of restaurants and wellness providers throughout the city, so that we were excited about that launch.
Thank you.
To the next slide. What we're trying to convey here is really the culture of wellness that we're trying to build. And so while I've spoken about several of our initiatives, what I'm really trying to convey is that it's a culture of wellness. It's a lifestyle, right? So all of these things are integrated together. How you think about your preventative eye care, how you think about your dental and oral health, all ties into, your annual physical, how often you use our different programs, giving you different opportunities to do that. And so I think what we're really shooting for is that we want people to think about changing their behavior so that they think about their wellness as automatic and not optional. So we just kind of wanted to give you that visual to talk about the wide world of wellness that we're trying to promote here at the city.
Thank you. Mr. Guy, do you have a question? Hello, Mr. Guy? See?
You hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. The first question is, on that last screen, it says Planet Fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And do they have a role in any of your programs?
Yes, sir, that's correct. So with our Wellness in Wilmington program, we worked with We worked with a small business consultant to help us negotiate discounts throughout the city. So in the example of Planet Fitness, where there is the basic $10 membership that everybody knows about, but there's also an advanced membership called it's like a Black Card membership. It actually went up last year nationally to $24 a month or $25 a month. And for the City of Wilmington employees, they're holding it at $19.95 just for city employees. So they came on site during open enrollment last year. They did a number of giveaways, but they were actually able to convert people's memberships right away to ensure that they were able to hold that discount.
Okay. Now, also in the previous presentation, there was a job description and the term was employee engagement. What exactly does that person in that position do? What is that, employee engagement?
Well, Charlotte, Director Burns might want to speak to that, but that position was listed earlier in the presentation as being deleted in order to fund another position. And what the director mentioned was that what we realized was that we were doing and performing engagement activities in various other divisions. I think my division could be an example of that in terms of our approach to promoting health and wellness. It's really a call to action to people to engage. And I think it's our responsibility to provide engaging programs to generate that behavior.
Okay, is that a vacant position?
Yes, sir, it was a vacant position that has been deleted.
Okay, and what happened to the person who had that position?
That position was never filled, sir. It was created within the budget and never filled. So it was deleted.
Okay. Then there was an issue where it was mentioned $62,000 was mentioned, and it had to do with external investigations. And two questions. I think it was stated that some type of human relations consultant or outside attorneys would do these external investigations. Did I hear that correctly?
What was mentioned, sir, was that for the 5 investigations that took place in fiscal 19, they were conducted by a variety of, they were sourced in a variety of different ways. In one instance, there was an outside HR firm that handled one of the investigations. In other instances, outside law firms handled the investigations.
So 1 outside HR and 4 law firms?
I don't know the specific number, but we did have external firms and or individuals. I can certainly get that information to you. It was from fiscal 19.
Okay, yes, please forward that information. Now, in connection with that same topic, who exactly selected these 5 organizations that conducted the external investigations? Who makes the selection?
The selection is a recommendation with, we collaborate and coordinate with the law department, and then we make a decision based on a number of different things, the nature of the investigation, whether it's been, whether it's a conflict, expertise of the particular organization that's going to do the work, but it's in collaboration with the law department.
And is the money that's used to pay comes out of your budget, this $62,000?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. And then you talked about the new payroll service. Mm-hmm. Now, is that the payroll service that also resulted in like approximately 3 city employees having some type of change in their assignment? Is that the same item?
I want to say it's been almost 2 years ago now that we have migrating to externally processing payroll. That is correct.
Okay, and was it 3 people that were then pulled out of that duty?
There was a, yes.
Okay, so what has happened to those 3 people?
Those individuals, actually more than a year ago, sir, and I'm very thankful to our collective bargaining units because each of those employees have been placed in other positions. All positions in the Department of Human Resources are non-union. So in accordance with the city code, those employees would either bump another employee or be displaced. Based on relationships with the unions, we worked with them and they allowed for those employees to be placed in union positions. Some of the employees to be placed in union positions such that no one was displaced, no one was laid off.
Did anybody lose any money?
That's what, when you bump to the salary of the position that you bump to. So if you bump to a position that is of lesser pay than you were currently making, then yes, you do bump to that salary.
No, my question was, did any of these 3 people lose salary by changing positions?
And the response, sir, is that yes, that is the process. When you bump to a junior position, you bump to that salary as well.
Okay, but I don't know what they bumped to. So I'm just asking, did any of them lose salary level in the change?
Yes, sir.
All 3 of them?
No, sir.
How many of them?
I can get that information to you.
Okay, that's fine. And when did this payroll service that was being brought in, when did they actually start handling the payroll?
We are still, that process is still evolving. There's been some starts and stops due to a variety of different reasons. And we are still migrating towards that. In this COVID environment, there's been some testing. There's been a lot of work that has been done, but it's not across the finish line yet. In this COVID environment, we are looking to see how we can marshal that over the finish line sooner rather than later.
So they have a contract, I take it. The organization does?
We have an agreement with them, yes.
Have they been getting full payment on the agreement since the agreement was executed?
Have not.
Okay. So how has that been handled?
Well, until we totally go live, they will not be paid.
Okay. So basically, they've not received any money.
That is correct.
Okay. And then the next thing is you mentioned residency investigations.
Yes, sir.
And are those done internally or are outsiders hired to do those?
We outsource the residency investigations. If we have to do surveillance, that is done externally.
Okay. And then can you explain how our unemployment, how is that handled? So if like one of our employees is let go and they file for unemployment, and let's say they're awarded unemployment, are we insured?
No.
Or are we self-insured, or how, just exactly how is that set up?
The city is self-insured for unemployment, and as we receive the invoices, we pay them monthly for those employees, whether our former employees or even someone who we've let go a while ago, but they are unemployed from a different venue. They go back several quarters, so we could still be on the hook. But yes, we are self-insured for unemployment.
Okay, so do we actually have to spend money for unemployment? Are people actually like winning cases against the city such that we have to actually make payments because we're self-insured?
Well, unemployment, I wouldn't characterize it as winning cases. It's a function of we don't pay unemployment insurance. We are self-insured. So when somebody files a claim for for unemployment, we do pay that claim.
Well, you pay the claim if the person's eligible to receive payments, right?
Yes.
Right. So if the person files for the unemployment and they have a hearing over there and it's determined they're not eligible, then the city's not going to pay a dime except attorney's fees, right?
Well, we don't typically engage attorneys for that. Someone on my staff handles that, sir.
All the way up through the courts if the people appeal them?
If there's appeals, there are appeals that are handled at the Department of Labor, and there's people on our staff that handles that, yes.
And if you go to the court system, if they continue on through the court system, do you get outside counsel or do you use the inside attorneys?
I'm not aware of one in my 6 years in the department. I'm not aware of one that has progressed to the court, sir.
Okay, so if they award unemployment for a city worker and the city has to pay that money, then some kind of way you'd get the bill from the state of Delaware that the city would have to pay. So are we having circumstances where we actually have to pay?
Absolutely, absolutely. We pay unemployment. And again, it's not necessarily employees that are unemployed from the city of Wilmington. You could have left the city of Wilmington's employee, go work for another company, i.e. one of the banks. That bank laid you off. However, unemployment goes back several quarters for who's responsible for paying for that. So the city could really be paying unemployment on someone who we didn't let go because we haven't let employees go. Okay, if you're terminated for cause, we could challenge your unemployment, but we haven't had to lay individuals off, so we wouldn't have individuals that we would need to pay unemployment for. We're typically paying for those employees that have left employee for other reasons. And we also pay unemployment for our crossing guards because during the summer, they go on unemployment.
Okay. So have we had to spend any money paying for unemployment because the city let somebody go?
I can get that information for you. And I can get you the information. I can't answer that question specifically. But again, typically if we terminate for cause, we can challenge your unemployment.
Okay. Maybe if it'd be easier if you have some kind of spreadsheet that might show like the invoices from the state over the last year, that'll kind of give an idea of what we're spending.
Okay, certainly I can get that information for you, sir.
Okay. And then the next question I had, my last one on your presentation, I believe it's the last one, and that is you mentioned the dispensary. Now, who is it that's in charge of the dispensary now?
Ultimately, I am.
Okay, but is there a doctor over there?
There is. We have contracted service with a physician. Yes.
Okay.
And that
and
person
who is the physician?
Dr. Senyoki.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr. Johnson, do you have a question?
Yes, Director Barnes. I want to thank you for the comprehensive coverage, and I know your team is working overtime as we go through this crisis. But Councilman Guy's questions, it kind of prompt an area that I have been interested in and wondering about. When was the last time the outside counsel for the Workers' Compensation Fund, when was the last time that went to bid?
It doesn't necessarily go to bid, it's professional services. I know we've been with the vendor since I've been within the department. So definitely for the past 6 years, we've had the same firm handling outside workers comp. Okay,
Does the city of Wilmington have any indication of the level of diversity efforts that firm makes or that vendor makes?
I can't say with certainty that I do. I will tell you that we use that vendor, but and that vendor's been in place since I've been there. It's my understanding, because it's a firm, that goes through the law department, so they may have a better feel on that answer.
Okay, because that is just you know, I'm familiar with the, obviously there's a lot of outside counsel, but you know, we're a very diverse city, and I'm interested in vendors that reflect the diversity of our great city, and from my knowledge, that vendor does not have great diversity.
Okay.
So you know, I would be wondering if HR would be interested in working with counsel and law department to maybe work on some diversity tactics for those outside counsel.
We'll certainly have a conversation with the law department about that.
Okay, and the same thing in regards to just the general liability defense. I do believe, I guess a few years ago, there was bidding on that. So has there been a new round of bidding for outside counsel?
Councilman Johnson, those are typically handled while they're vendors and they're paid through HR's budget. All of the outside counsel is handled through and by the law department. So that they would be better suited to answer how they select the vendors. It's just because it's a risk management, it comes through my budget.
Okay, and just shifting gears on another topic, what happened to the employee exercise program? That they used to be like a walk in the park program. Is that still active, or has that kind of gone by the wayside?
We have tried to find a number of different ways to engage employees in population health activities. With that program where we were doing, I think it were Walking Wednesdays is probably what you're referring to. I mean, we were providing incentives to do that our broker has advised that would have to be taxable. So we stopped providing the incentives and have tried to promote health and wellness through a variety of other means, one of which was spoken to by Donnie with giving you incentives for reduced memberships at gyms and things of that nature. So
okay,
we try every way we can.
Great, and this will be, I guess, either for you or Danny. Since employees now are stuck at home, I know Councilman Turner did ask about this. Is there any talk about implementation of an at-home wellness program, at-home workouts? I know Planet Fitness does those. You know, just something so that our employees stay mentally sharp while they're home.
We can certainly take that under advisement. I know we have vendors, as Donnie mentioned, Planet Fitness is one of our vendors that, you know, we do with our Wellness in Wilmington branding. And they do have a work from home option now. The Y, several of our employees are members of the Y, and they have a virtual membership now because of these facilities being closed. But that is something that we could look and see which of our vendors are taking that on and get that information out to the workforce as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Director.
You're so welcome.
Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. Discuss the 517 budgeted for workers' comp, up 317, up from 317,000.
There's a hand up.
Is this on previous questions or on this question?
No, on what we were just talking about.
Which question was that?
On what we were just talking about. The last 5 or 6 sentences that were stated.
The wellness at home? The wellness at home, Mr. Guy?
Now, Councilman Johnson mentioned about 5 things.
All right. Go ahead, Mr. Guy. We're going to run out of time.
Yeah, Councilman Johnson mentioned the topic about the diversity of the legal services provided to the department. And I just wanted to comment to him and in general, the law department kind of gets a free ride because they don't have a committee that has oversight over them. So that's how they've been able to basically not address diversity and basically not be accountable to anybody on that front. So that is something that is needed to be dealt with. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Oliver, you have your hand up? Councilmember Oliver? Is she on? Councilmember Oliver?
No, I'm okay. I was strolling. I'm sorry. I was strolling it, then I hit it by mistake. I'm okay. I already heard. I heard my answer.
All right, thank you.
But, no, but Councilman, Mr. Chair, I would like to give kudos to the HR department, because I think they've done an outstanding job with the benefits, with the new benefit packet and with the new exercise program. Just the whole wellness program, I think they've done an excellent job. I hear a lot of people talking about it, so.
Thank you. Okay, we're talking about the $200,000 increase, workers' comp. I don't know who was taking this, Ms. Barnes.
I believe that's Bruno Battaglia is going to handle that one.
Are you with us, sir? Make sure your mic's on.
Oh, okay, hold on.
No, I just heard you. Go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. Yes, I am going to take that. Actually, the account is up $317,000. And some of this is actually a reflection of trying to be accurate with our workers' comp. At one point, we had two lines that we were working with for the workers' comp. One was a legal defense fee line. It was formerly 524062. Last year, it had $165,000 budgeted into it. And we combined that now with the workers' comp other, because PMA is actually making all those checks out and paying those fees after we review the charges to make sure they're accurate along with law. With that being said, we did have additional costs, and some of these costs are because of the drivers of the 2016 Canby Park fire. We also had two new asbestos claims come in that are very costly, and we have expert witnesses that are very expensive. And then we also have had an increase in litigated claims that we've seen over the last couple of years. And that's the reflection of these costs. These costs are based on an actuary study by an independent company that comes in and give us the cost on the actuary based on existing claims and existing exposures.
Okay. Discuss the 4.3 million budgeted in the insurance account line. Specify there's been any savings over the last 2 years.
It's Jim Rod.
Okay.
That in the next slide. You can see the premiums before you. I don't need to read through all of them unless there's a question about one or the other. I can move to the next slide and talk about the excess general liability coverage. As to the question asking for any savings realized in the last 2 years as a result of the city purchasing excess insurance coverage, budgeted for $676,000. We've received about $1.3 million in payouts from liability insurance, as well as smaller amounts for vehicle damage and for risk control services. Primarily, the excess insurance coverage is to guard against having to pay catastrophic claims from city reserves, such as other nearby jurisdictions, such as Newcastle County and Newark, have had to do. So with that said, I'll take any questions.
So since we've gotten this, we have not had any of those type of claims?
Yes, we have. That's the 1.3 million that I mentioned.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And we have others that are in process. And the 1.3 million is a little misleading. It started out with a $7 million demand, and Baltimore had just paid $7 million for a similar claim. So the fact that we have this coverage, we are only responsible for 750,000 up to our limits of 15 million.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Discuss the 894,000 budgeted professional fees. List the vendor's name, length of contract, etc. Specify if there's any DBEs. Who's going to handle this one?
I can take that one. I can take that one, Mr. Chairman. The vendors that you see listed here are a variety of vendors that assist with us carrying out the responsibilities of the administration of employee benefits, the administration of workers' comp, and risk management as well. There is one, I cross-referenced this list of vendors with the city's list of DBEs, and there is one that is a DBA. But the range in services are from our temporary staffing, the actuary, the dispensary doctor, our telemedicine vendor. We're getting new software for benefits enrollment, our COBRA vendor and FlexFax, the organization that does our background checks, things of that nature. These are all the vendors that you see here.
Okay. Discuss the planned use of 90,000 budget and temporary salaries account line.
So the $90,000 in temporary salaries is primarily for.
Hello? Ms. Barnes, did you hit your mic or? Did we lose her completely? Huh?
Sure.
Ms. Barnes? Is there anyone else on that can answer that question? She's back on.
It looks like I'm back in now.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's primarily, it's across 3 funds. Some of it is temporary salaries to assist with our peak periods, whether that be open enrollment, the $10,000 in health and welfare, or the funding in workers' comp to assist with our fitness for duty exams for public safety and our summer youth hiring. But the lion's share of that is the funding for the risk manager who's paid from the temp salary line.
All right, before we get into the last question, I just want to remind any of the citizens participating that if they do want to make comment, they should be raising their hand at this time so that we allot time for you before we go off. Okay, can you justify the 78,000 budget across memberships and registration travel account lines? I think we've talked about some of these before, but do you want to just go over them quickly again?
We did, sir, and I guess I would focus on the things that remain. So in the workers' comp, what remains there is the training videos associated with the annual safety trainings that we have to have for our workforce, particularly those that are on the front lines in our labor trades and craftsmen, whether they be confined space training, whether they be bloodborne pathogens training. And then in the bulk of the lion's share in the health and welfare fund is our wellness education, also the professional certifications that we talked about previously as well.
Okay. And you showed a cuts in all the travel lines. Mr. Guy? Mr. Guy? Hello, Mr. Guy. With us? There he is. Mr. Guy, do you have a question? Is your speaker on?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, thanks. If I understood what was stated, that we have, I guess our method for financing workman comp is generally viewed as self-insured, but then we have a little bit of protection over a certain threshold. Is that what I just heard?
I'm not sure I quite understand your question, Mr. Guy.
Okay, I thought I heard it stated earlier in the presentations that our method of financing workman compensation is generally described as a self-insured program. But then it sounded as if there's an additional policy that we do have or we don't have if it goes beyond a certain threshold. Which one was it?
Okay, workers' comp is self-insured.
I understand that.
Yeah, and so what we are working to do is to build up a reserve within the fund so that we do not suffer the catastrophic losses that we did with the Canby Park fire. But I think the excess liability that you're speaking of was not necessarily workers' comp, it was for our other liability coverages.
Okay. So we actually don't have a policy that gives us any kind of protection if we go above a certain threshold in payments?
For what, workers' comp specifically, or for other liability coverages?
Well, for workers' comp specifically.
Okay, I know we are exploring that, and I believe we do now have coverage in that regard.
I can answer that. We have coverage for catastrophic claims, anything over 3 million, then unlimited above that. And we purchased that several years ago, not because of actuarial data, but because of the shock of the Canby Park fire and to assuage the chance that that may occur again. So yes, we do have that coverage, Councilman.
Okay, good. That's great to hear. And then our financial condition right now is blowing in the wind. As best as I can tell, the last WEFAC meeting got canceled, which...
Well, WEFAC is scheduled to meet next week, Mr. Guy.
Okay, well, the last meeting was canceled, so we don't have any up-to-date numbers. So I guess we'll have that shortly.
Yes,
Has
sir.
any of your numbers changed significantly in light of the conditions? And what I mean as the conditions, what I mean is that there's additional hazards that it seems as if some of our workforce has actually, I guess, been in danger, if you will. Like the 24 people, I think, that had to go and quarantine for a while to make sure that they were all right. We never really received the data on whether any of them actually had contracted the virus. We're not getting any kind of information, but those things can impact your predictions or your budgets. So I'm wondering, is there anything that you can share with us about how our costs function may change? And also we're going to have a substantial decrease in revenues unless we have some kind of magical luck. But if people can't pay their parking tickets or they can't pay, their taxes, then that's less money available to us in case as self-insured. It kind of puts us in a weak position, our financial condition. So can you guys speak to that? And I guess what would you say to WEFAC if they had that meeting a few weeks ago or whenever that was?
I don't know that I would speak directly to WEFAC about this situation. What I can speak about is that we have been in contact with our brokers, we've been in contact with the underwriters, we've been in contact with the third-party vendor for healthcare. And we do not see at this point any extraordinary differences in our healthcare, any significant claims. As I am aware of the employees that have tested positive. I would share with you that most are back to work. After periods of self-quarantine and self-isolation, most of our employees are returning to work. I don't have the data in front of me, and I don't want to speak about individuals, but I do believe there's probably one, and things happen every day where somebody is exposed and they may have to go into self-quarantine, but I don't know that there has been any, other than at-home treatment, that there's been any exhaustive treatments for, that would impact our medical costs.
Okay, and I guess related to that topic, it's interesting because as you watch TV, you hear every governmental agency like reporting how this is impacting their police department, how it's impacting their fire department, how they have large numbers of call outs and things of that nature. And I've not seen any information come by, come to me. Maybe somebody else was given this information that's given us any kind of HR report on how this is impacting our workforce with respect to people being out sick and things of that nature. Not anybody's specific name, but like if we've have 1/3 of the workforce that's out sick, that's something we ought to be aware of. So is that information being reported to council, all members of council, or is it not being reported? And if it's not, I believe it should be.
Sir, it is being reported every week. So initially we were, every time an employee tested positive or we had situations like that, we were sending that information out broadly to the internally and externally to the workforce and to the general media. What we've transitioned to, I want to say about 3 weeks ago, is doing it comprehensively. So I know for the past 2 or 3 weeks, there's a weekly update on how COVID has impacted the city, and included in that section is the number of employees that have tested positive, the number of employees that have been told to self-isolate or self-quarantine, and it may even give numbers on those employees who have returned to work. But that information is produced and shared broadly.
Okay, does it come to council?
I am fairly certain it does.
Yes.
I will
Okay.
double check, but I'm fairly certain it does.
And does it come to all of council
Yes, sir.
Yes.
directly?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, and that's in the last 2 or 3 weeks?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay. The last item is the org chart, which you have in front of you, and you can review at your leisure. That takes care of all our questions. There's been no questions from the general public. And we're finishing very close to the time limit as it is. So we're going to conclude this session for this hearing for the Human Resource Department. We're going to take a little break, and then we'll be back at 6:30 with the Law Department. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you, Ms. Barnes, to you and your staff for a very good job.
Thank you so much. Our pleasure.
Good evening and welcome back to this session of Wilmington City Council's Finance and Economic Development Committee budget hearings. My name is Bud Friel, and I'll be hosting the meeting. It is Thursday, April 23rd. We are in the middle of our 5th session dealing with Mayor Michael Brzezicki's fiscal year 2021 operating budget. So far this evening, we've heard from the Audit Department and the Human Resource Department, and now we're going to review the budget for our Law Department. Just want wanted to remind you that these budgets were put together prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of the departments will be mentioning potential cuts that they might have because of the crisis. We are required by law to pass a balanced budget by the end of May, which we will do, but it'll be a substitute budget from what the mayor originally proposed. And chances are very good that we'll be back in the fall to make amendments to the budget once we know the full impact both on the expenditure side and the revenue side from the pandemic. We're going to follow the same format. We're going to have a brief presentation by OMB, and then I'll turn it over to the city solicitor for some of his opening remarks, his vision, performance measures, things like that. And then we'll just jump into the question and answers. We've allotted 90 minutes for this hearing. I'm asking council members to keep all their questions to budgetary matters. Any programmatic or constituent issues should be addressed in other forums. If you have a question on certain answers, please bring them up at that point so we don't have to go backwards and keep going over material that we already covered. There will be a session at the end for public comment. If anyone from the public would like to speak, there will be allotted 3 minutes, but their comments should be in reference to the budget for the law department. Joining us is President Hanifa Shabazz, 1st District Councilperson Linda Gray, 3rd District Councilperson Cynthia Oliver, 6th District Councilperson Yolanda McCoy, 7th District Councilperson Chris Johnson, Councilmember at Large Sam Guy, and we're also joined by the Mayor's Chief of Staff Tanny Washington and Council's Chief of Staff Marshall Bastine. Did I see Councilmember Harley?
Yes.
4th District? Yes, thank you. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the Office of Management and Budget for their brief overview.
Thank you, and good evening, Chairman Friel, Madam President, and all other honorable members of City Council here with us tonight. Thank you for inviting me to present the Law Department's fiscal year 2021 proposed budget request on behalf of the Office of Management and Budget. First, let me remind you that further details on the Law Department's budget can be found in your budget packet as well as in your budget book beginning on page 91. Additionally, I'd like to reiterate the fact that the budget details I am presenting here are based on the original proposed budget, which was developed prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. City Solicitor Goff will be discussing further revisions to some budget items during his part of the presentation. Funding for the Law Department is derived solely from the general fund. The Law Department is requesting a total budget of $2.8 million. This represents an increase of nearly $156,000 or 5.9%. Personal services are budgeted at just over $2.1 million, an increase of nearly $60,000 or 2.9%. Largely driven by a 2% cost of living adjustment, or COLA, budgeted for all city employees. Regular salaries increased nearly $38,000 or 2.7%. This increase was somewhat offset by the elimination of the use of temporary salaries in the Law Department, saving $6,000. Other major funding changes in personal services included pension contribution up $7,700 and hospitalization up nearly $17,000. Total MS&E costs in the proposed budget are budgeted at $656,000, an increase of $96,000 or 17%. Almost the entirety of the increase is due to an increase in legal fees, up to a new budgeted total in FY 2021 of $350,000. These additional funds will be used to support consultants to be used during labor negotiations. This concludes my part of the presentation for the proposed budget request for the Law Department. I can answer any questions you have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Scott, did you have a question or?
No, I had a follow-up from the prior session, so you can keep going.
At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Goff, who is going to walk us through some introductory remarks and priorities for the upcoming fiscal year, and then we'll jump into the question and answers. Mr. Goff, are you with us?
I am. Good evening to everyone present, specifically to Chairman Bud Friel, to President Hanifa Shabazz, to all of the honorable members of the Finance Committee, as well as to those from Council who are attending on behalf of their districts or at large. My name is Bob Goff. I'm the City Solicitor. Also present as a panelist, I believe, on this Zoom webinar meeting is the Deputy City Solicitor, that's Rose Tassone. I believe my administrator, Javette Lane, may be present as well. I want to thank them and all of my team in the Law Department for assisting us in putting together the budget presentation, and also for all the great work they've done in the somewhat over a year that I've been a City Solicitor. When I came before Council last year, newly appointed, I stated my primary, or one of my primary goals, in addition to the general goals that the City Solicitor's Office has for its representation, was to fill the vacancies that existed. We were down several lawyers, and we were down several lawyers, and we needed to attract and retain lawyers to come into the Law Department. So I'm happy to announce that we have managed to fill our department. This is also related to one of the budgetary goals, or one of the goals I had last year, which was to try to create a environment in my department, as well as to increase, hopefully, our salaries so that we could bring in attorneys and make ourselves competitive with the state and also with the county employers of attorneys. That is a work in progress. And that was what we thought about when we were putting together this original budget. But as Council Member Friel has indicated, and has been stated by, I believe, all of the folks and department heads who have spoken to this committee, we are now presented with a different scenario. Of course, because of the, I would say, almost catastrophic effect of the COVID, novel COVID virus that has infected so many people and presents a danger to the country and also to the city of Wilmington. So I've had to adjust some of my thoughts, and the budget that you're about to see is really before this had happened. We've also, however, put in our presentation some potential cuts. And in making those suggestions of possible cuts, we've tried our best to preserve the central functions of the Law Department and to cut away any excess that we could see. There's not a lot of excess in the Law Department because unlike other departments, most, if not all, of our expenses are related to people that we have working for us and people that we hire when we need to do that for special services that we cannot provide. So it's difficult to find those things. So let me talk about our goal. Our goal is the same this year as last year, and that is to under the charter, present an effective and engaged staff to bring to city service legal professionals with the capacity and the desire to meet each issue, dispute that is facing the city, and also to assist the city and its component pieces, its boards, its departments, and its council in their day-to-day operation by giving them both advice, legal service in reviewing and drafting contracts, and also in drafting legislation and in providing opinions as they are requested of us. So that is our primary goal. Next slide. We also want to continue to provide aggressive defense and prosecution and litigation to coordinate the activities of our outside counsel when it's necessary to seek out their assistance, to provide legal advice on employment matters to the departments here and to HR, to provide strategic and legal support in negotiations of our collective bargaining agreements, and to assist and coordinate our outside counsel and our consultants and experts in serving us to craft and negotiate and sometimes to litigate these bargaining agreements. Also to deliver the necessary and appropriate legal support to City Council and to meet our budget targets. Our performance measures are to continually meet and exceed our stakeholder expectations for the effectiveness of legal advice and quality of outcomes, to continue to deliver strategic recommendations for the comprehensive update of the city code and charter, and also to monitor and control and supervise outside counsel and their expenses. Good. Now, those are the things that I think we spoke about to some degree last year. They are uniform, continuing goals that the department has and has had in the past and will continue, I'm sure, to have in the future. But in dealing with the crisis that we are facing in terms of revenue issues that the city may have, I put forward a number of different possible reductions which will assist us in reducing the budget for the law department. Right now, in our proposed budget, we have been funding an attorney who works for the District of Delaware U.S. Attorney's Office. And we've been funding that in the amount of $83,000 this year. It's up a little bit from the year prior. We are proposing to, unfortunately, cease doing that. One of the reasons is, it isn't that the job that the Assistant U.S. Attorney is doing for this isn't important. It's that this is not really one of the core functions of the law department. It is something that we've done over the last several years, and now we really are in a situation with the loss, probable loss of revenue, that particular function, which is a function at any rate of the U.S. Attorney's Office anyway, that we are proposing that may be a way in which we can reduce our costs at the city. After all, we will be seeking from the federal government, I'm sure, revenues through the legislation. So to be paying them for a prosecutor, federal prosecutor, may not make sense under the current environment. We're proposing a reduction in our court costs and notary fees. Part of this is because we had, I think, proposed a reduction of $5,000 in our current budget, but we're also suggesting that perhaps that can be cut in half Not every year do we use that. We do have in prior years and occasions that we've exceeded that, but mostly we've gone below. Lots of those fees are related to sheriff sales, and I believe that currently, given the economic environment, sheriff sales are down, and I'm not sure whether or not we will need as much money in that line as we have in the past. We had proposed in our budget an increase of to $350,000. We are now suggesting that that can be reduced. This is related to the limiting the amount of consultants that hired with regard to our labor bargaining situation. So that's a way in which we're proposing it. This would result in $223,000 of reduction from our proposed budget if it were adopted, any part of this. So it would be a reduction of close to 10%.
Okay.
So I guess that's our presentation.
Okay.
So we'll take our questions now.
All right. I think we already touched on the first one, which discussed the planned use of $350,000 budget legal fees up $100,000. But I think now we're saying that's up $20,000.
Correct.
Right. So if you want to just jump into the next part of it about specifying the vendors, contract
Sure.
amount, length of contracts.
Okay, so these are the vendors that handle our the legal fees that are within the law department. There's no contracts for them because they're at will. They don't expire or go out to bid or anything along those lines. We simply each year during the course of the year, as we need, we employ these folks to do the to handle complex litigation that we don't have the resources in our office to do. We hire them to do transactional work that they specialize in, and as a result, we are able to do the job in our office, the central representation that the charter requires of us. So this is the list of those different firms. In our process, we review with all of those firms on a regular basis, all of their activities, and determine and review each filing for quality. We negotiate, we review their fees, we negotiate them. We often ask them for discounts, almost always ask them for a discount from the regular fee for the city. And also we usually limit the number of attorneys that can work on an item. For example, if 3 or more attorneys or 2 or 3 attorneys are working on a particular item, we'll often suggest and gain the agreement of the firm to only charge us for one of those lawyers and that. And also we shop around the work we do between these firms. These firms here we've had working with for a long time, and that's because they provide a good service. They give us the discounts. They accept our suggestions quite often in terms of reducing their fees and their bills. And they are excellent at the particular specialized litigation that we request their assistance concerning. So I believe that answers 1A.
Mr. Guy, are any of these firms or vendors DBEs?
So that is the next question, I think. Is it not?
Part of one. It's 1B.
Yes, there it is. 1B. It's hard to answer that question because the law department, as far as I've been able to determine in discussing with folks that have been here longer than me, have never had a DBE process. They've never been asked about that. I looked into the code, and disadvantaged business entities and enterprises, it seems to be most of the discussions talks about relaxing bidding requirements and bonding requirements. It doesn't seem to have a direct application. The other problem is that it, unlike other businesses that are out there where the city actually has a list of different DBEs that they can cross-reference. I think Director Barnes mentions cross-referencing some of her vendors, and she found one of her vendors that was a DBE. We're unaware of any list that discusses law firms as disadvantaged businesses. The other difficulty is that the reason why we seek out assistance from outside firms, because we have 10 lawyers here ourselves, is because of the resources that each one of these firms have. They have often a deep bench. They have a large group of support staff and a lot more financial resources to accomplish their specialized activities than the law department has. So we're not aware of any law firms that would be eligible in that sense. We're open to it if others can point them out to us. We're not aware of any firms that would be qualified so that we could use them for these activities. So we don't know of any DBs that are.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson? Councilmember Johnson? Sir?
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much for, I think, covering that. That was online with the question that I had, Mr. Goff, was about the DB status of the law firm. Just cutting to the chase, I'm pretty sure the answer is no. Those firms wouldn't qualify as DBs.
I think they probably wouldn't.
Yeah. And so, I think we should take a step back. Has the city done a competitive bidding process or even a bid roster for outside counsel, similar to what the state has done? Okay, so the professional business contracts aren't bid out competitively in that sense. It's not required under procurement law to do that at the state level or at the city level. And as a result, we don't go through the bidding process. I know that when we when we use the firms that we have, we are interested in using the services of diverse members of those firms, partners and lawyers who are racially diverse, gender diverse, diverse as to their sexual orientation. We are interested in all of those things. But the primary reasons we hire a lawyer who doesn't work for the city of Wilmington is because, for example, they may be a firm which handles just personal injury law. So they can, do a much better and quicker job of handling a number of cases than we can in trying to create and trying to handle matters ourselves. And I think that Director Barnes, I know I had many discussions with her about her satisfaction with the current firms that are doing that. We are very interested, and I am very interested. I received your email today and was happy to see your offer of assistance in this area. And I am always interested in this. I know that I said that I spent the last year basically filling slots and then refilling slots in my office.
because as much as I get great people in here and people with racial diversity and gender diversity, it's really hard to hold on to them because the state, I mean, the state doesn't pay a lot either, but they pay better than we do. And the county, and then the private area as well. And we have missed out. I can't talk about individual folks who've who've worked for us or who have applied to us. But I can tell you that we interview, we seek to hire folks that are diverse on all different ways, including racial diversity. And we've been, okay, if you want to talk about bidding, we've been outbid quite a number of times over the last year. We have been lucky in hiring the people that we've hired. I think we've made great selections, but I would be untruthful. I didn't say I was disappointed that have not been able to create racial diversity or greater racial diversity in the lawyers in my office. And like I said, I welcome your assistance, the assistance of anyone that can guide us in this area.
Can I thank you, Mr. Goff, for kind of going over. Yeah, and I thank you for going over your costs and trying to trim some from the budget. I certainly appreciate that. But I do have a specific question about Operation Heat. So it's my understanding, I guess the city shares in the fee with the U.S. Department of Justice. So is the U.S. Department of Justice just going to drop the program completely, or is there a possibility that they would pick up the tab this year and then maybe we would continue once things shape up on at least the local side?
Well, I hope that's the case. I mean, it's up to council what council wants to do in terms of this. This forward because this is not, it's not an easy thing to say that when you operate a pretty trim ship to begin with, what sales you can do without, especially when you're in a storm, which is what we're in and about to be in. But that's we're tasked with. We're going to be asked to do more with less. So I certainly hope that if that cut or is made partially or completely, I certainly hope they will do that. Again, I'm not going to talk about individuals, but I was happy to be involved in the selection and approval of this person who's in this job. I know this person, having worked with them for previous years. And so it was a difficult email that I have written to the United States Department of Justice about this. And it is with heavy heart that I suggested that this may end up coming to pass. And I suggested that they would hopefully pick up the tab for the service that's provided here. And of course, when times get better, when the city isn't faced with huge revenue issues, then that's maybe we can put some more side salad in our plate, or I don't know how you would characterize it, but something that we can put more meat on the bone. Let's put it that way.
Okay, and I have one just final question. In response, I don't know if this is a question that's coming up, but in response to COVID, is there a possibility? I know your department's a little different, but there's a lot of regulations regarding FEMA, DEMA regulations, emergency disaster relief. It's very complex, as I'm sure you've waded through it as well. So is it any possibility that law department would pick up additional costs or expenses related to COVID, even maybe needing to employ an emergency attorney to kind of deal with this crisis?
Well, so far, I mean, that's something that we definitely would like to see. One of the things I know that the federal government and legislature has given us some ideas or some money, or at least given the county some money to disperse to deal with revenue loss. But unfortunately, the funds that thus far have been earmarked for this are only for that purpose are for expenditures and not for revenue loss, I should say. So the only way that could be done is if it was some sort of new COVID-related expenditure, as opposed to the loss of money to pay for an attorney. We're hopeful that the additional legislation, which I think is being discussed now to assist the subdivisions and mayors, that will become available. But that has not happened yet. And so we do have on the law department one of our senior attorneys who is part of a subcommittee or a group who is in contact with the governor's office, Senator Kuhn's office, the county executive office, all of the stakeholders in the money that is coming to us from the CARE Act, and that they are actively involved in advising and seeking that out. And I know that we're waiting. We just received guidance from United States Treasury concerning that, and we're trying to determine what that guidance means and how best we can access those funds so that the city can get as much as possible.
Okay. All right, Mr. Guy.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay, your law department is referenced in our charter. And in that reference in the charter, one of your clients, among many, is the officers that work in city council. There's multiple clients that you guys have. And it seems to me that since the last election cycle, one thing that the law department did is it stopped reviewing legislation and signing on every piece of legislation approved as to form. So if you went back in history, you'd see a signature of somebody in the law department for every piece of legislation going as far back as you can look. There may be some time where it didn't occur, but it would be way, way back. And so the city does not provide that service. The law department does not provide that service. To provide that service means you actually have to really review it because you're signing your name to it. Because basically what a lawyer says out their mouth, if they don't sign their name to it, then that's a whole different story. But that signature means something. So nothing is signed now, so nobody's doing that workload in a manner where they're accountable. Then also, we heard a budget presentation recently where it was a council budget presentation in an effort to put a $100,000 lawyer on the city council payroll. So I guess one question I have for your budget is that activity or that planned activity in any way connected with your department either no longer providing legal services for city council or reducing the legal services? Are those two things in any way connected with your budget and the city council budget?
Thank you, Councilman Guy, for that question. The first thing I note is that with regard to the approval as to form, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I've been looking at I've seen some pretty old ordinances out there signed from the early 1900s, and each one of them seems to have an assistant city solicitor or a city solicitor signing on them approved as to form. I believe that a couple of years ago, my predecessor decided to not do that any longer. And so what was put in place of that was these things were approved as to form via email. So I can assure you that although the signature actually on the legislation that has been there for over 100 years, as you point out, although that signature is not there currently, that each piece of legislation that is submitted is reviewed as to form by members of the law department, and that they memorialize that approval via an email when they send it to the staff over at council. So although the imprint on the legislation isn't there, it is done. It continues to be memorialized in the way I just described. And finally, I will tell you that I tend to actually agree with you, Mr. Guy, that that although this was an interesting experiment to not have the law department place their signature approved as a form to each piece of legislation, that that we are considering whether or not to return to that time-honored process, because that way, as you point out, there is something right there on the piece of legislation that says that we've looked at it, we've determined that this legislation is lawful, that it meets the standards that we see. And although that it doesn't prevent a piece of legislation from becoming law, if council wishes to pass it without having the approval of law or having the disapproval of law, if you want to call it that, we think that it is probably a good idea for us to have our name on the line for it. So I am considering that. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I'm glad you've suggested that maybe that's a good idea. As to the $100,000 and connecting that to that, I assume what you're referring to is the change from 250 to 350,000 in that item. Is that, am I getting that right, Mr. Guy?
Well, the money I'm talking about is in the city council budget, a position, $100,000 position for an attorney.
Oh, I haven't reviewed city council's budgets, so I have no idea what city council has there. So I don't.
Okay, all right. So
I know one talked to me about it, and I don't know anything about it. I know that folks sometimes have said to me that they would like to have an attorney in council, and I think there have been occasions when attorney in council has been there. The charter does have, as you point out, the city solicitor representing council, so there would probably have to be some sort of change in the charter to fully accomplish that. So.
Okay, so you said you didn't know anything about the council budget. So
I pay attention. I've been paying attention to my own budget.
Okay, so basically, if that is added to the council's budget, that's not because your office is planning a reduction in services to council and council members.
I do not plan any reduction in services at all. Council.
All right. Now, also, I don't want you to get it confused. Because I asked you about a topic does not mean that I'm suggesting that they sign it approved as the form. That was not a suggestion, nor was it opposition. It was an observation that less work was being provided to council by the law department by not signing those. And I understand your email statement, but what it actually does is the email puts it in the back room of the business of council. Your predecessor and some of their people, they would hold up legislation. They'd do what I call a law department veto. They'd hold it for the mayor or the president. So when you're taking into consideration what you're doing, just remember that was probably the genesis of them not wanting to sign, because they were abusing the ability to sign and hold everything up. So if your budget right now, does your budget right now contemplate the additional work of actually signing these documents? Or is your budget reflecting you continuing not to sign as the form?
Well, I don't think that has a budgetary or fiscal impact one way or another. The one thing I would disagree with you, Councilman Guy, on is that the fact that we no longer signed approved as a form on each individual piece of legislation, that in any way constituted a reduction in services or a cessation of review of those pieces of legislation. So I don't think that either signing or the legislation approved as a form, as has been done in the past, or doing it through an email process has any fiscal impact one way or another, or budgetary impact.
Okay. And the other thing is, so if you guys went back to signing as to form, you would not be requesting additional staff then?
I wouldn't see how that would matter one way or another.
And also, approval as to form. Form is the format. So it's not actually a substantive evaluation or a political evaluation as to whether you like the legislation or not. It's about the format. Am I understanding that's what your staff does?
Well, we do approve as to form, and also we are often called upon to review as to the legality or consistency with state law, constitutional law, our own internal charter, as well as whether it makes sense in the context of the code itself. So denying approval as to form is something that we would only do for those reasons if it was beyond the pale of consistency with those legal sources.
Okay, so all of those are
as a general matter, you're right. I mean, it's not a political review. It's not a policy review. It's not whether anyone agrees or disagrees with the substance of it. It's just a question of whether it's legal.
Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to wrap this up. You will both acknowledge that there's no budgetary impact here. So I encourage you guys to get together for lunch and continue to discuss this issue at another time, because I want to move on with these budget questions.
I would.
Yeah, I'm not finished.
Well, sir, I told you I'm going to move on with the budgetary questions because.
Well, my questions were budgetary. I asked them about the impact.
You guys both agree that there's no budgetary impact.
Right, and I have some more. I have some more questions.
I want to move on, Mr. Guy, at this time.
Well, you just trying to do what you always do. I have additional questions, and I'm entitled to ask.
More than fair, and let this discussion go on for some time. But you're talking about format and approvals and things like that.
And who pays for it?
You guys both admitted that there was no budgetary impact.
And I said I have some other additional questions.
I'm going to move on, Mr. Guy, to the next question.
You can't do that, bud. You're cheating. I have some additional questions.
Well, I'm sorry, sir, but I want to stick to the budgetary questions.
And I'm saying I have some additional questions.
You got beyond that.
Area that I asked about.
Let's discuss the city's legal fees with a proposed citywide budget across all funds for $2.6 million.
Bud, you're violating the process. I have some additional questions.
I'm not violating the process. I want to.
You are, and I always tell you.
had nothing to do with the budget. The last.
Sure they
several-
did. I asked them specifically at a budgetary impact. That's why I
And he
asked.
said no. So we
And I
move
said I
on.
have some other questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I want to move on at this point. All right.
But you guys are always doing this same
Look at
crooked
this you
stuff.
guys stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
fair. I mean, you've had, I don't know, you've had the last 15 or 20 minutes of the
I'm
hearing.
saying I didn't have anything at the other last budget hearing, but this one here, I have a question. about the thing.
Mr. Guy, would you please let us move forward?
I have some additional questions. So
Well,
you can put a
please.
time limit on it if you want to.
I did. We got 90 minutes to finish this hearing. So if we have time at the end, we'll come back. to
I'll
you.
wait. I'll hold them till we come back around.
All right. All right. Mr. Goff, could you go ahead and move on to number 2?
All right, so question number 2, if we could put the slide up on the screen for me, thanks. All right, there it is. Discuss the city's legal fees with a proposed citywide budget across all funds of $2.6 million. These particular fees are not in the law department's line. We come up with these fees by consulting with each one of these departments, and they tell us what their needs are for them. These are the usual fees that we have had pretty much from year to year. What we did change was the 300, I guess, the $350,000 with regard to legal. That, as I indicated, and I think I discussed it previously, had to do with that was in recognition of the fact that a consultant was hired for labor negotiations and litigation, and so we had to increase it in order to cover this year. We, however, decided to reduce it somewhat, or will decide to reduce it somewhat if we need to, and that's where the 270 comes from.
Sure.
Next one. And those are simply the firms that we've used over these years with the dates since when we have had them assist us. Okay, we can move on.
All right, and your answer to the DB question is the same as number 1. And
it is.
If I understand right, you were going to enter into some discussions with Mr. Johnson about diversity within the practice.
Yes.
Let's move on. Discuss the planned use of $25,000 budgeted consultants pertaining to legal support for the Ethics Commission, considering $138,000 was spent in fiscal year 2019.
So that $138,000 was actually money that was spent to hire a legal consultant for city council that occurred before I came on board. We've actually only spent about $13,000, a little more than $13,000 thus far for the Ethics Commission. So the $25,000 budget is, I believe, a reasonable amount.
Can you just talk about the number of cases that have come through the Ethics Commission? Or?
I believe that what we've had are one complaint that went to hearing and then resolved with a disposition. There were, all complaints require some action, but in the last 2 years, only 2 complaints. 2 complaints have been dismissed. One was dismissed after an investigation. The other one was dismissed because there was no claim made by the allegation. And there's one current complaint pending.
There's one that's still pending.
Yes, one pending.
All right. Discuss the planned use of $120,000 for court costs, and notary fees, considering last year to date actual is $38,000 and $49,000 in 19.
Okay, so this is a line that's hard to predict. We've had last 2 years, I believe it is, we've come under budget. But a year or two prior to that, I believe a year prior to that, we were above 120,000. We were at somewhere in the 140s. A lot of this stuff is driven by our filings with regards to sheriff sales, whether it's the nuisance sheriff sales or sheriff sales related to collecting fees from non-owner occupied properties. So the 60,000 is a figure that falls pretty much evenly between, so we're anticipating reducing it to 60,000 as part of our efforts to reduce in view of likely lost revenue. So we are planning to do that reduction, which I think is closer to the amounts that we spend each year than the 120.
And discuss the 69,000 budgeted between account categories of miscellaneous services and memberships and registrations.
Okay, so this is one of the ways in which, since we can't, that we don't necessarily pay our attorneys commensurate with the skills they possess, or equally with our colleagues who work for the state and for the county. This is one of the ways in which we can help out. And so we do pay bar fees, for the state of Delaware. We pay their district court fees, their Court of Appeals fees. We take care of, if they need to study and go to conferences related to matters that the city deals with, it has to be concerning a topic in which our practice here at the city touches upon. We also assist them by paying for memberships to the Delaware Bar Associations, to the municipal legal associations listed here, and some other professional memberships. Those are essentially the things that are covered by that, and they help us attract and retain attorneys.
Okay. Okay, the last question, as is with all the departments, is his organizational chart, which you have, and then I think he has some job descriptions that follow that council members can look at their leisure. If there is anyone, I don't know if there is anyone in the general public viewing that would want to make comments, they should go ahead and raise their hand so we can get to you before the end of the hearing. Are there any more questions that pertain to the law department's budget? Okay, I'm not seeing any, and I'm not seeing any hands from the public. Mr. Guy, you just threw yours up quickly.
Okay, you earlier mentioned you earlier mentioned the concept of real estate law. And my question is, does the law department provide, through your budget, does the law department provide legal services to any other entities or organizations or corporations?
Do we provide services? Over the years, the law department has had somewhat different policies with regard to blended or related corporations. I guess UDAG is a corporation. I think many years past, the law department represented UDAG. Now UDAG doesn't do that. UDAG has their own private counsel. I assume that your reference, I don't know what you're referencing, but as a general matter, no, the law department does not represent private corporations. I think by charter, we represent the Rockwood Golf Course. No, not generally. We try our best to maintain separate status from those corporations, recognizing, however, that They just each organization is different. Some have greater connection or overlap with the city than others. Some are more separate and independent than others.
Okay, and then on the issue of diversity, now I've just come from the county government, okay, and we had a minority that was the head of the law department, and the county exec Gordon and myself, as chief of staff and other varying roles, we had a commitment to diversity in the law department. So I don't believe that the issue of diversity is a function of money. I believe it's more a function of commitment. So I don't think your budget is really what the issue is. We had the most diverse law department that's ever basically existed anywhere in the state of Delaware, and was able to keep it. So I think that it's not about the money. I don't believe it's about your budget lacking. I believe that the organization hasn't had a commitment to it. And if that commitment is in place, then folks will come, because then they'll know they'll have real opportunities to deal with serious and significant legal matters, as opposed to just being someplace where everything gets shipped out to a private law firms. And also, I think, did you say that they don't have contracts? The law firms don't have contracts, or they do?
We don't have term contracts. It said that I think that the question said that what is the term of your contract? And these are contracts which are at terms. They're at will contracts, and I guess that means that either the city or the lawyers or law firm can walk away at any given time.
But is there actually
There's fee agreements that's required by law.
Okay, so you do have those. Okay, so the dollar amount is known on the front end, the hourly rate that they're going to charge you.
Correct.
Okay.
That's one of the things we negotiate in order to save the city money. We almost always, as far as I'm aware, in all the contracts I've negotiated over the last year and a half, have negotiated discounted fees from all these firms for their representation.
Okay, well, the law department or the auditor, somebody, or counsel maybe, needs to have every one of these law firms that receive city money, they should submit to the city the makeup of their law firm. That way we actually have the information from them, so that when we have these kind of discussions, we actually know. Because some law firm that we're talking about may have 5 or 6 minority lawyers, and we don't know. And some may have none and been receiving money from the city for the last 20 years, and we won't know. So I think they're getting government money. Somewhere in that code is some authority for us to be able to ask certain basic questions about their organization. So is that something that your department's able to handle, or should somebody else handle that?
We would be very interested in increasing the diversity of the people we hire within the department, as well as the firms that we retain. So we encourage it both in those firms, as well as in hiring qualified firms to handle the specialized work that we need to farm out. So we would be happy to do it. We coordinate and approve of all the legal representation, whether it's in our department and through our budget line, or whether it's through the individual budget lines of the other departments. So that's part of the chartered function of the city solicitor.
The lack of oversight for your department is what allows these issues to just continue on without being addressed. there's no organization to have oversight. And so, yeah, again, it's not about the money all of the time, it's about the commitment as well. That's all I have.
So I don't have anything further, Chairman. I think, Chairman, you're muted.
You're correct. I want to thank you, Mr. Goff, and your staff for putting together your presentation and answering all our questions. I want to thank my colleagues and anyone from the public that participated this evening in this hearing. I did want to make one short announcement. Next week, we have 2 additional hearings. Monday night, April 27th, we will first start off with some legislation that the Finance Committee has to consider to vote out to get it on a future agenda. And then we will have a presentation from the Finance Department on their budget and the Office of Information Technology. On Wednesday, April 29th, we will hear from the Planning Development Department, followed by the Public Works Department. And then on the following Monday, May 4th, we'll have our last hearing, and that will be the presentation on the Water Sewer Fund and their 6-year financial plan. So once again, I want to thank everybody for their participation. This concludes this session of Wilmington City Council's Finance and Economic Development Committee meeting. Thank you.